I remember when my young friend who had just gotten a new job came up to me, and she was very excited. She said, Stan, I've heard a lot about leadership and people at work, and you've been a good mentor and a good help to me as I try to start my career. And I'm off to a good start, but I wanted you to know that my new boss, you know what, Stan? He's the real deal. He's really good. For sure, he's the real deal. Well, I wonder what that meant. Well, of course, you have some idea of what that means because all of us have somebody, perhaps, or perhaps a certain characteristic that comes to mind when we think of they're real. They are a real person. Let me just ask you this. Could possibly the power of prayer have something to do with you being really you? You being the real deal. With your permission on the Praying Planet podcast, let's talk today about being real. I'm Stan Houston, and it is my privilege and indeed a pleasure to spend time with you at least once a week on the Praying Planet podcast. And by the way, as you are hopefully becoming more and more connected to us and finding out more about the coming Praying Planet project and how that could make a difference in your life, in your business, and the leadership you hope to give to the world in the name of Jesus, and the blessings that you might receive, the things that might come to you as you follow. As the old verse goes, when it comes to Jesus, you follow him more nearly. You love him more dearly. And that happens when you see him more clearly. So we will pray that that'll be part of your experience. Well, did anybody come to mind when I said he's, or I could of course say she's, the real deal? Now, what would that mean to you, that they're the real deal? I also think, when I go into that word, about a story that was very, very popular with me many, many years ago. Oh, many years ago. And it was when Amy and Megan were small children, and I read them a book, and we read it time and time again, and perhaps you have had that same experience, The Velveteen Rabbit. And for many of you right now, there's a smile on your face. That wonderful childhood story about a rabbit, a stuffed rabbit, that was dearly loved by the children. And in the many years of it being dearly loved, it got worn. And its velveteen became kind of sloppy and kind of ragged, and the Velveteen Rabbit lost a lot of its glow and glamour from being the Velveteen Rabbit. But of course, what happened was that the Velveteen Rabbit, as it lost all of its velveteen glamour, becomes real. Yeah, the real thing. It became real. Lovely story. And I still go back from time to time because it is like a lot of children's stories. It has great adult and maturity meaning right there in the story. Kind of a parable about growing up. And of course, there is somebody who knew that when it comes to changing people, one of the best things you can do is you can ask them questions, like we did last week. Jesus' favorite question: what can I do for you? What do you want? And told stories. Jesus was very much the once upon a time kind of guy. Let me tell you a story. Well, there we have the story of the young woman, and we have the story of the Velveteen Rabbit. And I hope that that will give you some idea of where we're going. I'm going to simply suggest, at least I'm trying to find out, that I would like to be, if I could be, less of a phony, less of a fake, less of a fraud. And as someone has said, there is a little bit of imposter in all of us. And it is that rare human being who has the self-confidence and the self-assurance to be fully themselves, to be fully who they are, to be real, to be real. Well, I'm going to encourage you today to think about that as we go through a description that has meant a great deal to me. Now, as we go through the Praying Planet podcast, there's a lot of things we'd like to meet. We're going to meet people who have stories to tell and testimonies. We're going to run into people who not only have stories to tell and testimonies, they're going to have some instruction. They're going to have ways for you and I to experience God's creative power in greater and greater ways, to be more connected not only to God's people, but to the very Word of God, be more connected to ourselves. And in that self-graciousness that God gives to us, we can be more gracious to others. And who knows what the world needs more of is people who pray and people who care and people who care for one another. We found out about Job. In the midst of his difficulty, he was challenged to pray for his friends. The book of Job is one of the supreme books on prayer. And then I will encourage you, as I did in one of our programs, to go back and look for an old book called A Diary of Private Prayer by a man named John Baillie, Baillie, John Baillie. And I confess, having picked the book up at kind of a second-hand bookstore, probably for a quarter, it changed me in profound ways. There he has a morning prayer and an evening prayer for every day of the month. But they are so rich in meaning, in praise, and in requests, and in confession, and in all of the things that can go to actually helping us to more and more receive the very Spirit and heart of God. It's just something that I carry with me quite often. In fact, I think whenever I get a chance, if I see a copy in a bookstore, I always buy it, and I must have 4 or 5 of them now. And if I get a chance, I will give them to people who I think might appreciate them. The language is a bit old-fashioned, and that adds a certain charm to it, but it certainly leads me by the words that are used and the very expressions and such into a different place. And in this different place, I seem to have a little closer experience with God. As someone has said to me, and I've kind of adopted it myself, worship and prayer is there to make the walls between this world and the heavenly world paper thin. Worship and prayer is meant to make the wall between this present world and the eternal kingdom of heaven paper thin. Just think about that for a while. Well, a book that is much more contemporary and much more modern, certainly based on the times we're in, was the book by Bill Hybels of a number of years ago called Too Busy Not to Pray. And that's one of the first challenges that I ever really got into, and when I began to suggest that maybe I should be less of an activist and more of a prayerist. I'm an activist. I'm a go-getter. I'm a high-energy person. I'm type A. Go, go, go. Fast, fast, fast. Run, run, run. That's what I do, and I do it well. But it hasn't always gone well for me in doing that. And more, slow down. You move too fast. You gotta make the moment last. It's not a hymn, by the way. But in that pop song from years ago, you're beginning to get a view of what it might mean to be more in touch with God. Another gentleman that I've come across in the world of being a performance coach was a man named Jim Rohn, who said if you want to figure out what kind of people you will be or what kind of person you are or will be, look at the 5 people you hang around with the most. And for the most part, we'll become like the people we hang around with. Who do you hang around with? Well, Bill Hybels, in his book, particularly, and I'm turning to it easily right now, and the reason I can turn to it easily is it is a well-worn part of the book. It's almost worn out. And Bill Hybels, Pastor Hybels, says this. He calls it the authentic Christian. The authentic Christian. Now I want to stop here just for a moment. I asked, what does it mean to be real? Now, what do you think an authentic Christian is? Does that bring a little different view or another person into view? What does that mean? Just think about that, and then we'll see what kind of answer the good pastor gives us. Here we go. And could prayer help us become real? Authentic Christianity is not learning a set of doctrines and then stepping in cadence with people all marching the same way. It is not simply humanitarian service to the less fortunate. It is a walk, a supernatural walk with a living, dynamic, communicating God. God talks, you know. Thus, the heart and soul of the Christian life is learning to hear God's voice and developing the courage to do what He tells us to do. Authentic Christians are persons who stand apart from others, even other Christians, as though listening to a different drummer. Their character seems deeper. Their ideas fresher. Their spirits softer. Their courage greater. Their leadership stronger. Their concerns wider. Their compassion more genuine. Their convictions more concrete. They are joyful in spite of difficult circumstances and show wisdom beyond their years. I confess that is highlighted, well marked, many notes there, stickies and post-it notes, because this has moved me profoundly, and it still does from the day I read it many years ago. He goes on, authentic Christians are full of surprises. You think you have them neatly boxed, but they turn out to be unpredictable. When you are around them, you feel slightly off balance because you don't know what to expect next. Over time, though, you realize that their unexpected ideas and their actions can be trusted. That's because authentic Christians have strong relationships with the Lord. Relationships that are renewed every day. As the psalmist said of godly people, their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on the law they meditate day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. Embarrassingly, few Christians ever reach this level of an authenticity. Most Christians are just too busy. And the archenemy of spiritual authenticity is busyness, which is closely tied to something the Bible calls worldliness. Getting caught up with society's agenda, objectives, and activities, to the neglect of walking with God. Any way you cut it. A key ingredient in authentic Christianity is time. Not leftover time, not throwaway time, but quality time. Time for contemplation, meditation, and reflection. Unhurried, uninterrupted time. Time to listen, time to speak, time to pray. I'm Stan Houston. This is the Praying Planet Podcast. Contact. We'd like to be in contact with you. We hope that the Praying Planet, as it begins to go and grow and launch, that you will have an increasing part of what we are all about. Bringing people from all over the world together so that they can be connected in the power of prayer. So they can really be able to connect more with themselves, more with God, and enjoy God's creative power, which comes in prayer. So that life and business and leadership and the things that they are about in their living, in their life, leadership, and living, they will be able to find that God is nearer and clearer and dearer to them, and making them more powerful, more real, more authentic, more like Him. And we hope that you'd join us in that. Why don't you stay in contact with us? Again, contact at prayingplanetinfo.com. That's contact at prayingplanetinfo.com. I hope to hear from you, and we hope that you'll join us again, and that you will find a way and a place to even be a part of the podcast effort. Not only will we be doing this podcast, but other ones, and those other ones might include what God has moved you through His Spirit to do and contribute on the Praying Planet. Best and blessings to you. Again, as our friend Corky Hahn would say, and as he smiles down from heaven, he would simply say, "Yes, Stan, keep praying, keep praying, keep praying, and indeed, you will be real." Best and blessings, and bye for now.